Relax, the keyboard is off, the press box is closed, and the mic is just getting warmed up as the Guardian of the Blue Paint turned writer is about to enlighten us. The show where the writer is fresh off the presses and the ink is not dry. For this week's show, the Hockey Writers Inc. welcomes the voice of the Philadelphia Flyers, Jim Jackson. Welcome to the Hockey Writers Inc. Join Lance and Steel as we bring you all the latest on the Flyers.
Hi guys, welcome to another edition of the Hockey Writers Inc. I'm your host, Lance Green.
And I'm your co-host, SteelFlyers. And ladies and gentlemen, it would not be a Flyers preview show without the main man, Pots and Pans. I mean, come on, we had to have Jim come in and give us a preview of what he thinks this Flyers season is going to look like. You've heard about what me and Lance have talked about all summer. Now we're going to hear from the man. All right. So the man from NBC Sports Philadelphia, Mr. Jim Jackson, the voice of the Philadelphia Flyers. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, guys. Any start of a hockey season is a great time, so I'm ready to go.
Exactly. You're all warmed up, got the vocal cords all ready to go. And
well, we don't really do. We only do one of the first 4 games, so
I know.
I don't have to warm up too much, but eventually we'll get busy. Yes.
Awesome. Good deal. But you guys have done some preseason games, and
yes.
You guys are already in mid-season form. You and Jonesy.
What exactly is our mid-season form? I'm not sure. Does Jonesy ever have an off season? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's a busy man.
He's a busy man. But we wanted to bring you on here, Jim, because we wanted to break down the Flyers season here and what your thoughts were on the start of the season, where you think this team is going to go, and maybe even your thoughts on the coach and how we're heading in the direction that Tororella is going to kind of steer this ship. Do you know what I mean?
Well, at the beginning of a season, any season, I think there is excitement. I sense from a Flyer fandom that at least is on social media, and by the way, that is not necessarily a majority of Flyer fans. We get caught up in our world of following Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all this, of thinking that every comment we see is representative of how all Flyers fans think. So I don't want to get caught up in that, because that is actually more of a vocal minority. But I don't think that there's a ton of optimism around this team with the Flyer fan base. Probably as low expectations for a Flyers team that I've been around maybe in my entire time here. And that might not be a bad thing, because it's always good to do things that people say you can't do. I think that was a saying in my high school yearbook, actually. Greatest joy in life is doing things people say you cannot do. And I do believe John Tororella will use that as motivation to get this team to maybe surprise some people. It's easy to look at this Flyers team and say, where are they going? There's no talent. There's this, there's that. Those are all overstatements. This is a team that has talent, that underperformed last year. It also is a team that was ravaged by injury last year. As we've talked about many times in our discussions, they have to be healthier. They already have some injuries to deal with, but they have to be healthier than they were last year. If they aren't, they will not have a great year. There's no question about that. But if they do have some kind of health compared to last year and even the year before that, and with John Tororella guiding the ship, I think you'll see an improved team, and a team that might surprise some people. Will they win the Stanley Cup? That would be quite a story. But will they compete for a playoff spot? I think that is a legitimate possibility if John Tororella has his way in reestablishing the identity this team wants to have.
So you're saying that for this year, based off of if we can quell the injuries a little bit more and stay a little bit more healthier than what we have been in the last 2 seasons, you feel that this team is at that level with Tororella steering the ship is at that level.
It's at the level to compete for a playoff spot. Yes. Now, keep in mind that means it's they can compete to be in the top half of the NHL. Doesn't mean they're going to compete for the cup. Doesn't mean they're going to go on a Stanley Cup Finals run. They don't have a lot of offensive talent. So as John Tororella has said, they are really going to have to grind out games. They're going to have to win a lot of 3-2, 2-1 games. I think they have a goaltender who can get that done. I think they have enough of a talent level in place and players who are willing to buy into the system right now. If they aren't willing to buy into a system now, they'll never be ready to buy into a system, because they went through a terrible couple of years. That should mean that these guys are willing to listen. And so far, from everything I've observed, and we actually are talking to players again, one-on-one, face-to-face, which is great. I get no sense of any players who have anything but total respect for John Tororella and are buying in completely. So if that happened, 40 players were in the South Jersey area as of early September. I've never seen that amount of players. So there's definitely a buy-in from the players. If you get that, and John Tororella is established as a coach who can win, I don't see how this team, unless they're, again, completely destroyed by injuries, won't be at least competitive. But they are lacking some offensive talent to score a lot of goals. And last time I checked, you need to score to win. So there are limitations to that. I will say going into this year, though, and you guys have heard this before, we've had discussions. My whole theory on this team, everyone's saying they should have done a complete teardown after last year. They already did the complete teardown. That was under Ron Hextall. They got their salary cap situation straightened out. They got a ton of draft picks, and they spent the teens basically rebuilding. Now, they did maybe camouflage it a little by going to the playoffs every other year for that long stretch, but they were, no doubt about it, rebuilding. Mr. Snyder, in his last years, really stayed away from putting pressure on the organization to make that move to be good for that particular season, and they just tried to build through the draft. And in the late teens, even though Ron Hextall lost the position, that was kind of due to other circumstances.
Right.
It looked like that rebuild was kind of working, because in 1920, as we've talked about, this team spent a large part of that season as one of the best teams in the league from mid-November to the pause. They had the second best record in the NHL. So, and a lot of the players, the Carter Harts and the Travis Konecnys and the Ivan Proruffs were leading that charge. We're leading that. So the rebuild was kind of working, and then the pause hit. And it's just never been the same for a variety of reasons. I mean, they were all right in the bubble. They got to the second round, but they still weren't playing great hockey. And then, Travis Konecny hadn't been the same since then. Alain Vigneault wasn't the same after the pause. And then the injuries hit, COVID hit, all these weird things happened. The world changed, and the team has not been the same since. I think what management's decided to do, although they didn't go all in, because if they went all in, they would have gone after Johnny Gaudreau, I suppose, and sacrificed more of the future. But they've at least given most of what's left of this group a chance to get back to playing really good hockey and show that this group can be a competitive team. But make no mistake, if this team is not competitive and we roll around to January, February, and then most importantly, the trade deadline, I think it will be time to really tear this thing down. So there's a lot at stake here. And working against that, you have a new coach putting a new system in. So there's going to be a little bit of a time, I think, where you've got to give them a little time to get that all set. So I'm not thinking they're going to jump out 10-1.
No.
But you never know in sports. But I mean, the thing is that it's got to take a little patience, but not too much for this group, because if we're rolling around 2-3 months into the season and they're really struggling, then I think management might think, okay, it's time to move on. And we start looking into this next draft and the draft after that, which they have a couple first-round picks, and go from there. So really important time for the Flyers here over the next 3 or 4 months.
Lance, you got something for Jay?
No, I mean, he hit the nail on the head. I think one of the biggest factors is going to be health. Over the last couple seasons, we've seen big names in Couturier and Hayes be injured, for the good portion of the seasons. And yet again, Coots is out. Farabee is going to be out. They're battling back. Atkinson's battling back, and Hart is as well. So a lot of key names for this team that were going to be factors for this season are coming back. So, as you see this in practice and everything coming back, do you think that the team chemistry is coming back into play more now with I want to say Hayes and certain players coming together with some of the younger guys like Owen Tippett? We saw that in a preseason game, and some of these matchups or pairings that are going to have to work now that we are Giroux-less.
Well, I really, for once, by the way, I will say this: over the last week to 10 days, there's been good news on the injury front. Joel Farabee is skating, full practice, talked to him today. He is ready to go.
Nice.
Carter Hart, ready to go. No preseason games for either of those two. I think It doesn't really bother me too much with Farabee, but with a goaltender, I would have liked to have seen him get into a game. But he's going to get into the games starting Thursday, so he's good. Couturier, the latest news on Coots is that he is not as seriously injured as some people reported,
Right.
and that he's skating again. So one would assume that he's got a chance to come back. It's a back injury with a big man. I'm not saying he's going to come back and be 100% Coots, but bottom line is it's not like he's done for the year either, which were some of the original reports. Cam Atkinson's a question mark still because he wasn't on the ice as of Tuesday. They only have, as of Monday, they only have one more skate, full skate before the opener. So, but I think from what John Tororella said, he's expected to skate Wednesday. And so he should probably be ready for the opener, at least at this point. Yes, still bad news with Ryan Ellis. He's not here. And obviously some of these injuries are kind of red flags. It's natural for all of us to say, here we go again, because as you said, Lance, these are key players. You just mentioned the starting goalie, one of the leading goal scorers of the team, the best all-around forward, one of the young guns that you're expecting to really improve. So these are important players, and you just can't go through that again. So I completely understand. It's exactly what I thought when I heard of the Couturier injury and the Hart injury and the Atkinson injury is here we go again. But they can't get into that. They've got to avoid that. And clearly, I think the Flyers as an organization, given what they've gone through the last couple of years with injuries, are being very cautious too. So once the games start, I think you're going to see most of these guys in the lineup, first of all, if not all, outside of Ellis. And we'll see how it goes injury-wise. The Flyers are doing whatever they can. They've rearranged their staff. They're doing more in terms of analyzing these injuries. They're doing whatever they can. I know you want to reach out when you see this trend of injury after injury and say it's somebody's fault, but sometimes it's just guys get hurt, and what can you do about it? But they certainly want to diagnose these things well, get the proper treatment, get them back into the lineup as quickly as possible. You're going to get some injuries. They just can't have catastrophic injuries as they had last year. So hopefully they're beyond that. We could sit here for an hour and talk about that, but that's really up to, what happens with injuries.
Right.
But what I can say is they have a lot of good young players here. Some are young veterans. Some are absolute youngsters, pretty new to the league. But these are the guys who will determine the fate of this team. If Travis Konechny and Ivan Provorov and Travis Sanheim, who actually did last year, but if he continues to and the other two get back to where they were, you're talking about three pretty darn good players there. A number one defenseman, a 30-goal guy, I think, at Travis Konechny, if he's playing the way he was. He was on a 30-goal pace the last season before the pause. And Travis Sanheim, a solid second-pair defenseman who can maybe play second power play. That's three really good players right there. So if they get those three going, and they've all – Konechny was out a little bit, but they've all had pretty good camps. I mean, that's big to start. Then you look at the younger players. You mentioned Owen Tippett, huge. If they can get him to be a top six forward who can score 20, 25, 30 goals, as he has in his past, that would be big. Noah Cates, they're going to move him to the middle. He's going to play in the middle, and they said it's not a short-term thing. So when they hit the ice against the New Jersey on Thursday, it looks like Noah Cates will be in the middle on that third line. Noah Cates, everything they've thrown at him, he's accepted and thrived.
Yes.
So I'm really looking forward to watching him. Cam York's start the year in the minors, but that doesn't mean you're not going to see him pretty soon. They got to get him going for sure. But there's good young talent on hand here. I haven't mentioned several others. Tana Lazinski's going to probably start the team as a fourth line center. And so we can go on and on with this. There are these young players. They have to take – Joel Farabee's a huge part of it, obviously. These are players that have to take a bigger bite out of this team. They have to become not just young guys that occasionally show a glimpse. These have to be young guys that become important players on this team. And then there's Carter Hart, who is the most important of all these young players. He's still young, especially for a goaltender. And if they play the system that Torts has played, and I'm pretty sure they're going to from what I've seen, he's going to have a lot more support than he's had in years past. It's a system built on building your team from the goalie out, from protecting the house. And I think this could really be good for him. So if Carter can stay healthy, I think he'll have his best year. So you put all that together, and you're not talking about a team that's going to be 31st or 32nd in the league. You're talking about a team that might be able to climb into the top 16. And if you can climb into the top 16, you're obviously competing for a playoff spot. It's a lot to have happen. Don't get me wrong. I just gave you about 7 gazillion things. So it's not like this is a given, but there is a way to that happening. And sometimes when you're just reading, responses to tweets and reading social media, you feel like it's hopeless. It's not hopeless. There is a way this team can be successful this year. It's just going to take a lot of things to fall right.
I mean, I think you mentioned it, Jimmy, and even you too, Lance, that the younger players have to take a larger bite out of this team. Okay. And you even mentioned it as well too, Jimmy, when you talked about the pause year and the year after, where some of these guys kind of regressed. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that one of the keys that I'm looking forward to this season is exactly what you guys both said. I want to see these guys taking a bigger bite out of the team. I want to see these guys taking more of the being in every situation type of thing. I want to see these guys getting the important 5-on-5, 5-on-4 power play, penalty kill minutes. I want to see these players do that. And I think that Tororella is the type of coach that can put these guys into that situation where they can be successful. Do you know?
Well, if you watch John Tortorella's, if you saw him, he's spoken to the media the last couple of days as we lead up to the opener. He basically said what he said. It's about these young players. And he also said, I know this isn't necessarily a patient town, but, you're going to have to give these guys. I mean, Noah Cates has played center before, but not a lot. And I think there's probably going to be some anxiety there. He's a very intelligent kid from a hockey standpoint, and I think he can pick it up. But centers, there's a lot more responsibility as a center than there is as a winger. So, there's going to be an adjustment period there, but I think he can handle it. I think the kid's got a hockey IQ off the charts, so I do believe that he can handle it. And then with Owen Tippett, it's a matter of him rediscovering his mojo offensively. And one, I'm totally forgetting a very important young player is Morgan Frost. So, and he has shown some glimpses, certainly in training camp. And if he reaches that next level, which for him would be to become a solid NHL player, and he could make another level from there too. All of a sudden, you're looking at this team that some people are throwing out there as bereft of talent, and it's just not the case. Now, if you look at the ways most of these guys played, not all, I mean, Travis Sanheim certainly played well last year, and there are others who had their moments. But if you go off of their performance from just last year, okay, I can see why you might think, wow. But if you think about where they were drafted, where they were projected to be, even as recently as a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and what they might be able to do under a coach that really is into getting these players to get to reach their potential. Yeah. I'm not saying that Mike Yeo wasn't. Mike Yeo had very little opportunity when he was thrown into last year. Yeah. And Alain Vigneault had this team playing really, really well, and then the pause hit, and then it really kind of got away from him. But the bottom line is these guys have that potential. They've got to hit that potential this year, in my opinion, or else there's going to be decisions made to I think, change the direction of this team. But I don't see John Tororella ever coaching a team that tanks. I can tell you that much. And the people out there are all about Connor Bedard and what might happen with the draft. I just can't see this team like going away that way, and not with John Tortorella as the coach.
I don't see this team going at this way. Period. Like that just doesn't flow in Philadelphia. The word tank or anything like that. So
I will say this: there's definitely a part of the fan base that wants this team to just go after Connor Bedard. The thing is, the NHL is not foolproof that way. You could finish 20 points below another team in 32nd place and still lose the lottery. So it doesn't. The Flyers have been there. I mean, they finished second in the lottery once, and Patrick Kane was there. I mean, it's just. You can't. I don't think you can base it all on that. People talk about these teams that have tanked, and people talk about these long rebuilding process. They talk about, right now, of course, because of the defending Cup champs, everybody talks about Colorado. That wasn't a one rebuild. That was kind of their second reach at a rebuild. If you remember, Matt Duchene and Ryan O'Reilly were actually originally part of the rebuild.
Yeah, and they were part of it. They got moved out.
They ended up getting McKinnon, and then it moved on. They got Makar. It happened. But it didn't happen in a linear way by any stretch. Right. And if you think about Buffalo, they've been drafting in the top 10 forever, and they've never come out of it. Edmonton at one point had 4 first overall picks in like a 7-year stretch.
Yeah.
Didn't get him anywhere. They got McDavid after that, and it's kind of getting there. But Connor McDavid's about to enter, I believe, his 8th year, right? And they just finally got to the 3rd round of the playoffs. So these things.
Need to draft a goaltender for sure.
Of the process, you know, going back to the Sixers and what they did and all that, it's just not foolproof. So if you want to just throw away a year or two and give that a shot, go for it. Personally, I'm about trying to win every year. So they're going to do their best with what they've got this year. They've got a good head coach. They've got some good young talent that has perhaps to this point, some of them, I'm generalizing here, but underperformed. They have some veterans who kind of sagged some over the last year or two. But if they can get these players back to where their potential was, where their levels were in the veterans' cases, they're not going to be nearly as bad as people think. They're going to be better than last year, that's for sure, if all that happens. And again, as we prefaced to start the whole thing, health. They have to have some health.
Well, you talked about the youth and how, you know, the coach really wants to have some youth into the lineup, and he spoke on that numerous times. As far as the team, they have to get down to 23 players by 5 p.m. I believe today. Currently, they're at 30. So they've already sent down young players like York, Elliot Dejournay, Tyson Forrester. You know, of course, Bobby Brink is out with injury. That was a tantalizing prospect that we had that tore apart the NCAA last season. You know, those are some of the guys that we wanted to see make a big jump this year. And for me, Morgan Frost, I think, you know, he's had camp after camp where he looked spectacular in camp, but really hasn't taken that next step yet. Wade Allison has been hurt. You know, who in your mind do you see besides Noah Cates? Of course, he's looked, you know, lights out and looks like he just gets it right now. But who else, you know, do you see making this team out of that young core? I think Sealer and Zumel are battling for that last spot on defense. You know, who out there, you know, has looked in your mind worthy of making this team?
I mean, they're really lanced down to close to 23 that are actually skating. It looks like 30 because there's Ryan Ellis is still on the roster.
Right.
The players that are going to go on to LTIR. And they have 3 goalies up right now. They're probably going to end up with 2, I would imagine, at some point. Samuel Ersson is one of those young players that really popped in this training camp, but he may end up winning the backup, but I think they want him playing in Lehigh Valley eventually, but Sandstrom's got a bit of an injury issue, so we'll see about that. Morgan Frost, you make it sound like he's been here 10 years. He's really only had 2 healthy camps. 2 years ago, he got hurt really early on, had the shoulder injury. That really wasted that whole year on him. Last year was the first year that he really showed up and he had put some weight on and really started to look like an NHL player physically. And he's put a little more. I just talked to him today. He's up to 195. So I'm really interested in watching Morgan. There's a ton of talent there. And, you know, it just needs to be unlocked. And John Tororella might be the guy to do that. Joel Farabee is another one who we think of as old. He's 22. I mean, he's a guy who I really think can pop as a close to, if not all-star kind of player. So you've got him. I will be interested in seeing how the Cam York situation unfolds in Lehigh Valley to start. And, you know, we know there's a ton of talent there. I watched him basically control the tempo of games for a World Junior team as the captain and as the lead defenseman. I mean, that's there. It's in there. And, you know, he's just got to work it out. He's a 21-year-old. He's, you know, again, another guy that seems like maybe he should be older than he is, but he's 21. Yeah. And then Carter Hart for goalies is still very young for even an NHL player, you know, 23, 24 as the year rolls along. So he's still in the development part of his career. That's already, I've named 4 or 5 names that I'm really looking forward to. Tippett's another one, a little bit older. Wade Allison, if he could stay healthy, would have been an NHL player already.
Yeah.
Same thing. You know, these are all players, different roles. Some are bottom 6 forwards. Others might be top 6 forwards. And then some are, you know, Cam York, if he's playing, is very definitely a top 4 defenseman, you know, if he's got his game together. So there's plenty of young players here that I really am looking forward to see as the season rolls along. And some of the guys you mentioned, I mean, Denoye is not ready yet, but he's a guy down the road, and I think he needs some time in the AHL to get his game going. And Tyson Forster's another one. So there's certainly going to be some eyes on Lehigh Valley as well in terms of prospects. And then they have some prospects who aren't even here yet, who aren't,
Right.
even, and Andre is the defenseman, and some others, obviously Cutter Gauthier. So, but, there's young talent here, young talent coming. It's not like this team is, without any young talent, which you do see if you just read some of the, the previews and so forth. They aren't looking into it. But the question is, for some of the ones who've been here already that you've mentioned, we've mentioned, time's up. It's time to be more than just that kid that occasionally shows us a glimpse. It's time now to be, in Morgan Frost's case, a top 6 forward, or
Time's up.
at least top 9. For Noah Cates, same thing. And for Owen Tippett, same thing. Joel Farabee. I mean, there's 4 players right there that if they're able to show, that's 4 of your top 9, your top 9 forwards. And then you've got some veterans in there like Atkinson and Couturier and Hayes. So now all of a sudden you're talking about 7 or 8 or 9 here. Your top 9 are filled with pretty good players. So it really is incumbent upon those young players, the youngsters and the young veterans, to really either get back to where they were if you're the veterans, or take that next step if you're youngsters. And it certainly can happen. It's not like these players suddenly all became bad players. It's easy when things get going in the wrong direction, when you have a lot of injuries, you have the COVID, you have a coaching change, for kind of the malaise to set in over the whole team. So to really evaluate the young players and even some of the young veterans completely just off of last year, if you do that, it doesn't look good. I give you that. But I think that's being short-sighted. If you're evaluating Travis Konechny right now, for instance, if you're evaluating Travis Konechny off of last year alone, he wasn't bad, didn't score enough goals, but he's actually better as a playmaker last year and driving play. 2 years ago, not a good year for Travis. If you evaluate him off 3 years ago, he was on pace for a 30-goal a year. He's still a young player. I mean, he's still not to the point where his career's going down, that's for sure. So that's in there. We know it. And it's possible he's even better because as a human, he's more mature now. He's a dad. And he's got all kinds of things going on that, he's a mature individual. So, Konechny, Provorov, huge. I mean, Ivan Provorov, we saw him early in his career. We saw him even in his second or third year, how good he can be. He can still be that. It's not like he lost it for good. So they have to rediscover that for those guys. And in Sanheim's case, just keep going on the upward trajectory that he was on last year. And you've got some really good young veterans as well. So it's just not hopeless. But again, a lot of these players have to take those steps up. So it's not like it's going to happen and be there just on opening night and boom, they're going to take off. It's a process to learn Tortorella's system and a process to get back to where they were.
So now, with that being said, now we've got all these great young players that are going to hopefully take more of a bite and take a bigger step and do more of a thing here. How much rope do you give them now? And that's kind of the thing, right? So, because even Tortorella said this is not a patient town. And look, me personally, have no problems with being patient and waiting for this team to come around, because I know if they put these guys together and they keep putting these guys together, and they might be losing now, but it's going to be better in the long run because they're going to gain that experience and they're going to get that good coaching and all that other stuff. You know what I'm saying? So how much of a rope do you give them?
Well, that was what I started by saying, that this is a very interesting 3 or 4 months. You have 2 processes going on here. One is getting used to Tortorella's system and getting that to be implemented. He said that it usually takes till like the middle of November of a regular hockey season. Yes, we're having one of those this year.
A regular hockey season, that is.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, you never know. But I mean, so mid-November-ish for that. Okay, I can be that patient. But not much longer than that, because if you stretch it out into December and then even further than that, now you're looking at almost half a season. And now you're looking at being buried in the standings, and you're giving management, putting them in a position where do they start trading off assets to build up and do the tear, not really the tear down, but really an aggressive rebuild through the draft next year and the year after that. So how much rope, to answer your question? Not a ton. a little because it is a new coach, a completely new coaching staff. So we have to see how that happens. But again, not the full season. I mean, if this team were to struggle into February and then go on a little bit of a run after they're well out of it, to me, that would be fool's gold. I think that might be, again, it's going to be up to the management, Chuck Fletcher, and the people making the decisions as to what they do. But if you've gone 3 or 4 months and not played well at all with this group, I think at that point, the constant becomes that this team hasn't played well in 3 straight years, and the narrative of injuries being the whole problem, or that kind of starts to slide by the side. If this team suddenly in mid-November to late November starts to play better, and then in December gets on a little run, and then by January they're playing some really good hockey, you might say, hey, look, this team, these players, the Provorovs, Konechny's, and Sanheims are playing like we expected they were. Noah Cates and Tippett and some of the young guys, Morgan Frost, are really starting to look like NHL players that can be regular top 9 forwards. And maybe Cam York's come up from the minors then and is playing well. I mean, a lot of things might have to happen, but a lot of things also, not all of them are going to happen. I understand that. But if a majority of those are happening, the team is probably going to be playing pretty well at that point, and you're probably going to be looking at a team that's winning some hockey games. So if that happens, I think you probably look at it and say, yeah, maybe it was the fact that they were decimated by injuries. And now that they've got a coach who's put a system in and they've adjusted the system, we're a hard team to beat, and we're winning some games. And maybe then they add at the trade deadline, because they will need to add goal scoring, I think, at some point if they really want to compete for a playoff spot. Unless all of these young guys all become great goal scorers. I mean, that would be an optimistic side of it. But, it could be. It's not out of the realm of possibility. You get to the trade deadline and they're really starting to play well and they're right in the mix in the playoff race, that they add instead of subtracting. But if it's gone the other way, I mean, at that point, that rope, I think, has been used.
Okay. Well, as you were talking about adding, yes, I think this year, above many years in the past couple of years, the AHL for us is going to be filled with prospects, whereas the team over the last couple of years has had guys spread out in the NCAA, in the SHL, guys all over the place, and expecting them to develop the players further. Now we see some of those guys finally get to Lehigh, and they're going to be playing together. All those names we've already mentioned that have been sent down are here, local, close, can be brought up in an instant if need be for injury. But with that being said, do you think the team could look for a long-term IR possibility in Ryan Ellis and use that cap space to go out and grab some of these maybe last-minute waiver wire guys, or trade for somebody, like you were saying, to give them a little more offense if somebody's, plentiful with that on other teams? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, the waiver numbers came in just before I started with you guys. I don't believe the Flyers claimed anybody. So if you're talking about right now,
no, not right now.
It's going to happen. But if you're talking about if the team starts to show management that, hey, they're getting Tortorella's system and they're playing better, as I said before, and they're actually, competing in the playoff race, sure, I think management might look to make a move where they add to it. I don't think they're going to, at any point, sacrifice their first-round pick from this coming draft, because it's thought to be one of the deeper drafts, better drafts, top end, as well as deeper drafts in a little while. But there's still ways in which you can maneuver to get players. But I don't think we're there yet. We're a long way from that. I think at this point, we want to see how the young players play now, how the young veterans play, see how the team comes together, and then go from there. It's really going to be important 3 or 4 months. I mean, if it goes either way, in a direction way up or way down, what we're talking about might change drastically. If it's kind of in the middle of the pack, that's when it gets tough for management. What decision do they make? Which way do they go? If the team's kind of playing better, but still 5 to 7 to 9 points out of a playoff spot as they roll into January, February, March, what do you do then? That's when these decisions become really tough. I mean, if the team's really awful, I think the decision's made. If the team's really good and in a playoff spot, I think the decision's made. But if they're like in that middle area, not quite in a playoff spot, but not quite out of it, they've had a couple of decent little runs, but they've also had some bad runs. Then what do you do? That's when it gets a little tighter and tougher. But I do think what's happened, given what's happened the last couple of years, and given where we're at really in terms of this team, that right now at least the slant is more toward changing things big time if they aren't really moving forward, really up there in contention. But again, I can't give you a number. I can't give you exactly where. It might also
Sure.
Like how they look, that kind of thing. What's the team look like? Are they competing in these games? So there's a lot of variables there. But to go out and buy Lance or go out and get players now, I mean, if they wanted to get Johnny Gaudreau in the offseason, they would have had to have given up quite a bit of the future from what I'm told. Yeah. They didn't want to do that. So clearly their eye is a little bit on the future. John Tororella is talking about playing the young guys a lot. So, that's an eye toward the future as well.
Right.
And so I think that's where they're leaning. But I think, wins and losses can change that too. So we'll see.
Yeah, all that makes sense. No, I was just saying, with the potential 6.25 coming off the books or a good portion of that of Ryan Ellis's contract soon enough with a long-term IR, whether because Coots is still battling out, Patrick Brown's out still, a couple of injuries still, lurking with Bobby Brinks and everything, whether they might add, who knows, if they could even find a trade partner in that mind is what I was going after. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they will have cap space, it appears.
For sure. Whether they
Ellis. So whether they use it or not is a question. And I think the players will basically give them the answers on that.
Right.
Okay. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I know that this is a big question as far as we see it a lot on the social media, and we see it a lot of the questions that are being asked. And me and Lance have our own opinions, but I kind of wanted to get your take on this, Jim. And we've even heard from Tororella too, where he said that he's not going to name a captain for the team. I personally feel that he's going to let the team pick the captain, okay, and let the guys come to him.
Could be. I don't really think he cares at this point too much, Steel, because the obvious choice to me as captain would be Sean Couturier, and his status is kind of up in the air right now as to when he'll be back, how long he'll be out. And then you have other players who certainly could be captain. But I think there's such an emphasis right now from the coaching staff on just getting everybody pulling the same rope, getting everybody in on this and getting them all acclimated to his system and so forth, that I don't really think there's a major emphasis on having a guy wear the C. I mean, plenty of teams have gone a full year without wearing the C. So, having a player wear a C. So I think you can get by without it for the whole year if you have to. If they determine that there's a player that absolutely fits that mode and they feel as though it will help, maybe they name one mid-season, but I don't think that's a main priority. He's been pretty blunt about the fact that it is not a major priority of his. Right. So I think he's just worried more about the general team than anybody wearing the C.
Right, but I was just kind of poking to see your opinion on who you would probably.
Well, if I was coach, I often think you should put that in the players' hands anyhow.
Right.
Take a team vote. But I mean, if it was my decision by itself, Couturier would wear the C if he's playing. But if he's not, I mean, there are several other players. I'm pro Ross, Scotty Lawton.
I like Scotty Lawton. There's a reason why they call him Sarge. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys, but
yeah.
I don't think it's an important issue. I really don't. I don't think Scott Lawton cares. I mean, would he be honored to wear the C? Obviously, he was
sure. Yeah.
Tremendously honored to wear the A last year. And I'm sure Ivan Provorov would be honored to wear the C, or anybody else that they would give it, Cam Atkinson, whatever. But it's like I don't think any of them right now are really that concerned about it. I just think that there's just bigger things to worry about right now. It's about group leadership at this point. Yeah. This team will go a lot further if they have that group leadership. So to have one guy wear the C looks great. It's great that we make that announcement and someone has that position. But from the overall standpoint of this team and where it's going, at this point, it's not that big of an issue.
I like the idea of the 3As. I like the idea of having a group leadership for this team, because I think exactly with what you said there, Jim. I think this helps this team acclimate better to the system. I think it helps this team acclimate better to the players that are trying to learn the system, and the new players that have come in with some of the other, guys that have been brought in, and some of the younger guys coming up and spending more time and doing that kind of thing. So I was just curious as to what your take on who you thought would be a captain, because me and Lance both think that Scotty Lawton would be, we just really think he would be a really good captain. That's who we would pick.
Yeah, but yeah,
He's one of my favorite players in the team. I'm never going to say a negative word about the guy, but Sean Couturier is really the leader on
I
the ice
agree.
as far as and Sean Couturier is, if you have the word dependable and you need, a picture next to that, he's as dependable as it gets. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about injuries, but I'm talking about just his persona and what he does on and off the ice. He's just so either one, you can't go wrong. And as I said, there are others you couldn't go wrong. But it's fun, I think, as fans. We talk about it more than it's really talked about in the locker room or in the coaching room. It's right now they're all captains, and they got to be captains of themselves and be ready to give the absolute best of what they have in order to stick in the NHL with the Philadelphia Flyers.
That is a perfectly good point there, Jim. They need to be captains of themselves. They need to watch their own yard and take care of their own business first before anything else. Because once you do that, then all of the other team stuff, I think, will come. And we've talked about it for this entire show. These younger guys need to take a bigger bite out of what's going on here. And I think if they do that and step up like everybody's, we've just talked about for the last 40 minutes, right? I think if that happens, then yes, I do agree. I think this team has the makings of a team that could potentially do something, maybe not this year. I don't have an expectation of playoffs this year at all. If they make it, bonus. To me, that's just a cherry on the cake, right? This year, I'm kind of looking at it as we need to see who's going to be on and who's not going to be on, who's going to buy in and who's not going to buy in. Right. Is Tororella going to be given the opportunity to make the team his? To go to management and say, look, this guy is not playing, we need somebody else, or whatever the case is. That's kind of what my expectation of this team is for this year.
I mean, I think there's a lot of fans that are in that same boat. I personally never start a season without hopes of a playoff spot. That's just the way I am. Doesn't mean it's realistic, but that's just the way life is too short to start a full season in any sport without at least some hope of something good happening. I mean, and in sport, there's current examples. I mean, you look at the Phillies, where they were when they changed managers. They were dead in the water. And now they're one of the final 8 teams, and people are saying they're a dark horse to do some serious damage. There's lots of NFL teams, one in particular, that were expected to be awful this year, and it's pretty good so far. You just don't know. So I can tell you, New York Giants football fans weren't thinking their team was going to have a shot at all this year, and I still don't know as if they do have a shot, but bottom line is they're 4-1, and now they have this coach who's got them with a lot of optimism, and some players who they thought were awful players are starting to look like a lot better. Who's to say that doesn't happen with the Flyers? Who's to say that John Tororella doesn't have this positive impact on a lot of these players who people might have a negative feeling of coming off of last year, and all of a sudden these players start playing better, and this team's better than they thought. I personally think this team is better than a lot of people think they are, mainly because in the sports world now, and it's probably pushed along by social media, we just go way overboard either way. If a team gets off to a good start, they're going to they're going to win the whole thing. Lose 2 games, they're dead. So we kind of overreact, and that overreaction now is punctuated by social media. So I think everyone's overreacting a little bit off the last 2 years because there were extenuating circumstances. But there's certainly validity in the fact that, if they were a deep enough organization, they could have handled these injuries better and not completely fallen as they did last year. So, it's somewhere in between probably. But I don't start any year without at least a hope of at least competing for a playoff spot. I've been here 30 years. The team's only missed the playoffs a handful of times, and this is the first time in my time here they've missed the playoffs more than 1 year in a row. But 2 years in a row now, and so I'm not used to that feeling, and I don't think I'll ever get used to that feeling. So, are they a favorite to make the playoffs? Nope. You can check all your previews out on that. But in a month and a half, that could all change if they get off to a decent start. That's a challenge too with a new coach and all that, but it could happen. Anything can happen in sports. So,
Exactly.
And it's certainly possible by 3 months from now, as we talk about turning to 2023 in January, that all of a sudden this team is competing for a playoff spot. It's certainly possible. So you might go into the year still thinking playoffs bonus. I don't think it's a bonus until, they're almost mathematically out. And then if they somehow make a run, then it would be a bonus. But to start the season, I still think they have a shot.
I think they're going to be better than what they were last year markedly, because let's face it, you can't go anywhere but up compared to what it was last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do I believe they're going to be a markedly improved team? Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested to see a lot of this young talent, but that's why I'm tempering my hopeful expectations. How's that? Does that work better?
No, you should sound
right.
better. You're in the majority. Believe me, I'm very much in the minority.
Well,
But that's more me, just the way I approach every season to every team I've ever broadcast or ever been a fan of. Why start the season thinking, if we make the playoffs, it's a bonus. You play the games to make the playoffs. So, and there's talent on hand here, not talent that we're all thinking highly of perhaps right now because of the year they had last year, but talent that I've seen in years past, talent that I've seen among young players that they hopefully can get to in the NHL. That this team could be a lot better than people think. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying it's possible. And I'm not saying go and bet the house on it. I'm just saying the negativity you see, some of it is just like, come on. If you go through life feeling that negative about everything, it's going to be a long life. It's going to be a tough life because there's always challenges. You have to find ways to overcome challenges. You have to find ways to maximize the positive of things. And there are positives with this team. People aren't looking that hard maybe because of what they've seen the last couple of years, but there are some players in this team that could pop this year that could be really good, much better than last year. And if that happens, if enough of that, 5 or 6 of them, that happens to 5 or 6 of the players, all of a sudden this team's not so bad. So I tell it to every fan I talk to. Many of them come up to me. The ones who come up to me personally or reach out to me are not as negative as necessarily the ones who just spout on social media. The ones that come up to me are more like, please, Jim, give me some hope. And I basically tell them exactly what I'm telling you guys today. I mean, there are plenty of reasons for hope. I'm not saying they are certainties, but certainly reasons for hope. And John Tororella is the kind of guy who's got a track record of bringing these kind of things out of players.
Yes.
So it's not completely just a miracle hope. There's hope with some legitimacy to it.
And this is genuine hope. You know what I mean?
I really like his systems. Tortorella, you've seen in the preseason games, yes, they've lost, all the preseason games, but wins and losses in the preseason doesn't mean anything. You saw the team already working different systems. You saw them working rather well. Be that as it may, Carter Hart wasn't there in net and all that for some of the closer games. And teams were definitely stacked some nights with more NHL-driven lineups than others. But, for me, I think this team will be better because they have the systems in place now, and Tortorella is going to be that guy that is going to push players to the brink of being something that they didn't even know they were and get the most out of a person, or he's going to push you if you're negative in the locker room, if you're that bad apple, he's going to push you right on out too. And a lot of guys say, oh, I don't want to work. I don't want to, play for this coach, whatever in this past. But I believe Tortorella was the one that decided that for them already and pushing them out and making them make that decision so that to be asked to be traded for and whatnot, because he did not want that type of player on his team. So I really think that to Steel, to your point earlier, he is already making an impact on this lineup. And you can see that with some maybe questionable waivers already with McEwen. You know, he was a fan favorite last year. He's put out. You know, I kind of liked him in preseason, but there's a lot of space for young guys to make this team. And, you know, one or two guys can go down to the AHL and really make a difference and really get their feet wet down there and get going. And I could see any number of those guys make a curtain call, come up when somebody gets injured, and really be a factor in this offense. They just need to get a little pro style living or way to play the game and stuff a little bit more. And this team really could get going if everybody stays healthy. That, like, you know, like you said, JJ, it's going to be a lot of ifs. And if everything has turned the tables and maybe we see that injury bug, you know, surpass us now with all these guys coming back healthy. Fingers crossed. I really see a lot better lineup than we've seen the past two seasons, even with the younger guys coming in, with the guys that are still left here. You know, I see something that could be maybe not a potential playoff team this year, but maybe a team that's a player away a year from now, where Cutter Gauthier is now coming in, Kaplan's coming in, Alec Bump, you know, is coming in within a year or two, and really get this team going. I thought this last draft especially was very good. A lot more getting back to that power forward role where we had so much success before, you know, with Wayne Simmons and John LeClaire and Knuble and Hartnell and, you know, all those great power forwards that this team has had so much success with before. I think we're going to get back to that now with this newer crop of draftees coming into the lineup in the next couple of seasons. So I'm very hopeful. You know, obviously I don't want to start out the season as a negative Nancy and saying, oh, this team's going to stink. I want to see them succeed. So hopefully all the stars align, and hopefully Tororella can continue to implement this new system and a new way of thinking and a new way of preparing for the game that some of these players, I don't believe, have had the opportunity to have this hard of a camp and be this prepared physically to start game one. So I'm just hopeful.
Yeah, and let me say this about the preseason games. Normally, I say don't put too much stock in them because they are what they are. But this year, even less so, because the Flyers went into camp and John Tororella skated them, and skated them some more. No pucks first day of practice. It was all about skating, and he wanted to test these guys physically, but also mentally, and he did. But that also left them with no legs for a couple of the games. Second of all, some guys got hurt, minor injuries, but even guys like Rasmus Ristolainen and Travis Konecny, guys who we haven't even talked about as being injured, they had minor things that kept them out of games. So they were extra precautious, as you would imagine they would be coming off the year they had injury-wise. So it really, I mean, twice we had home games where I think the visiting team had more NHL regulars than the Flyers. You never see that in the NHL preseason, but it shows you how careful the Flyers are being about playing their guys because they just don't want the injuries thing to be a thing again. So for that reason and the fact that he was more worried about skating these guys and they really had no legs left for a couple of games, I'm not really worried. They also, the third reason, they had not practiced the systems at all. Now, they knew what his systems were and they tried to implement them in those games, but they hadn't practiced them at all. Now they've had a good stretch going into the regular season opener of 8 or 9 days, and 5 or 6 of those practice days where they've worked on the systems, the power play, the penalty kill, all that. So they should be better prepared. But even given that, it's going to be a work in progress. There will be bumps in the road, and when there are bumps in the road and John Tortorella's around, they can be pretty steep bumps. Let me tell you, there's going to be some things where he might not be happy with the team or a player or reporters or what have you. And I think we're going to see that. So it's not going to necessarily be a smooth ride here in the early season. But as he said, by mid-November, you want to start to see at least some signs that they're getting it. And then as you move into December and toward the new year, real signs in terms of the win-loss column that they're getting it. And then by January, feel like, okay, this team might be going somewhere. But again, will be bumps in the road, guaranteed.
Yep. Guaranteed for that, and expecting those bumps. You know, I saw a couple little interviews, one with Hayes, and he said that this was the toughest camp that he's ever had, and that he said that Tororella came to him and personally challenged him and said that he was going to be riding Hayes hard this year, and he said that he was looking forward to that. Okay. And Scotty Lawton came out and said the same thing, that, you know, this was a really tough camp and learning how to do things a new way. You know, not that the old way was wrong or bad, but now they're just doing it a new, different way, you know, under Tororella. You know what I mean? So I do believe that this guy's going to have an impact on this team. I think he already has. I think he's had since the day he was here. Okay. He's had an impact on this team. So whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's definitely been an impact on this team for sure. And I'm looking forward to the start of the season. I am cautiously hopeful. I look for the team to be a lot better than what it was last year. And so that gives me the hope that I can go into this season and go, yeah, this is going to be one of those seasons where you're going to see the winds of change are going to come, and you're going to see some different things. And I'm excited to see some of those different things. Okay. It might not show up in the win-loss column, but they're going to show up in other places where I think this team needs to build more of an identity. They need to build more of that. When you come into the Flyers building, this is a tough team to play, and teams get that quote unquote Flyeritis, you know, where, oh, I'm not feeling good tonight, coach. I can't play against the Flyers because they beat me up. You know what I mean? Like I have that feeling that this team is going to get more back to that, and exactly with what both of you guys have pointed out, with a good system in front of Carter Hart, I think he has a shot. That's all he needs is some defense in front of him. You know what I mean? So.
I think it's a big prove-it year for him as well. Even though he is rather young, you know, his confidence has been broken years past. You know, he's fired his sports psychologist and all the different things. So he's gone through a lot these last couple seasons.
Yes, he
has. I think this season, among any other, they finally, you know, with not signing another backup after losing out on Ivan this year because all the tragedy that happened to him, but we won't get into that. But, you know, I think they've really handed him the reins and said, you know what, it's yours. Take over, show us what you got. There's no perennial, like, you know, career backup, you know, guy that can come in and play 20, 30 games. There's some younger guys and Sandstrom and all that, but I really think they put trust into Carter Hart, and, you know, whether that be a smart decision or a bad decision, it's going to be up to him to prove himself this year. And I think with this system, they're going to be better defensively in front of him. So like Jim said, you know, I think he'll have his best year if he can stay healthy of any that he's had. And that includes, you know, when he was going into the bubble and playing rather well. So,
yeah. Awesome. Well, guys, I'll tell you what, I think we got a pretty good wrap here on just about where everybody stands on this team and the start of this season. Jim, any final words on maybe kind of like where you think this team is just going to be, or maybe should we say, hey, how do you feel about the team in the first 10 games? Because that's where you pointed out to where the Tororella system should start to take effect by that 10th-ish game. They should be into the system now, and that gets you into November almost. You know what I mean? So what is your outlook on the first, let's say, 10 games?
Yeah, I mean, he said mid-November, so it'd probably be a little more than 10 games, but
15. Let's go.
Yeah,
15.
it's gonna. I mean, we'll see. I mean, he also said that this isn't rocket science.
Right.
You know, systems in hockey are not that different. There's subtle changes, but it's more changing how they approach the game than the X's and O's of it. And you know, for some, bad habits take a little bit longer to get rid of than others. But I think he's anticipating that they'll pick it up pretty quickly. As I said to start, and I'll say it to end, there's a lot going on in the next 3 or 4 months, and it's going to be determined by what you see on the ice. Hopefully, without the injury issue as part of the, muddying everything up.
Yeah.
Hopefully, they're a relatively healthy bunch. We get to see if this team, this kind of group, is as good as maybe they were about to become a couple of years ago, and then sprinkled in with some new youngsters. Or we get to see that they just aren't cut to do it. And of course, they're without Claude Giroux's production anymore. So they did not replace that. So again, the offense could be a challenging thing for them. But bottom line is, you got to see those signs pointing in the right direction, and quite a few of them, in order, if you're me, to not think about really changing the direction as we move toward the trade deadline and the end of the year. So these will be an important 3 or 4 months. The first 10 games, I don't think are vital. I think you just want to see the team buying in.
Effort.
You don't want to see them getting blown out. You want to see them signs of a better structure around Carter Hart. But I don't think wins and losses in the first 10 are, it's like if they go 3-7, am I going to be panicking? Not necessarily.
Right.
As you move into November and December, then you want to start to see maybe some of the wins paying off as the team gets together, figures things out
Gotcha.
under Tororella, and moves forward. So that's where we're at. Important time, but you've got to really watch everything and see how the pieces are falling into place before you make any really rash judgments on this club.
Gotcha. Lance, I'm going to put you on the spot, buddy. What do you think, man? First 10, 15 games, kind of, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, Jimmy's got it, nailed it right on the head there. It's going to take some time with these new systems in place. I really think they're going to pick it up quickly, though. I think it's pretty simple. Not saying that, Torts' systems are, easy to, but I like him personally as an old goaltender. Here I like his ability and forefront to play defense first. You got to prevent more goals than you score, and as Jimmy said, this team is going to be hurting on offense, so that focus should be even more so on defense first. Yeah. And then work it on out. You have a guy in D'Angelo that is great at getting the puck out of the zone and making that first, and as well as Provorov, and Sanheim can jump up into the play with, Risto being able to drop back and cover him. So I think that defense is gonna be the focus point, and they really have to be solid. They have to be solid in order to keep Carter Hart mentally in this. So, if they can do it, I think they'll make up for that lack of offense until the offense can really get going and really get camaraderie or gel together with whatever lines he sets up. And, first 10, 15 games may be a little rough, but be that every time a team gets a new coach and a new system in place. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Let me say this also, Lance, about the offense. Really helps if your power play gives you something,
anything.
So if Rocky Thompson's able to put together a power play without, a top-notch NHL power play specialist at this point, you could say James Van Riemsdyk is kind of a specialist in and around the net. Tony D'Angelo maybe from the top. You have some pieces. But if they're able to put together the power play and just be mediocre with the power play, that's already 5 wins or more than last year. No, there's no joke.
No,
they lost
easy.
a lot
Seriously.
of games. The plus minus didn't look good at the end of the year. I understand that, but they also were within a goal in the third period of like 80% of their games, something like that. So they were in a lot of games that they just couldn't finish. Well, if you have an extra goal a game here or there, maybe even only an extra goal a game every 2 out of 3 games, you're going to win some of those games. And so they need the power play and the special teams in general, but the power play in particular, to be at least mediocre. And if it's mediocre, you're into the middle of the league. This team will be not as bad offensively as we saw them last year. I mean, you look at the 32nd ranked power play. That means you're relying on 5-on-5 offense for all of your offense. And that's tough on any team in the NHL today. So if they can get that power play at least respectable, that would certainly help in terms of that offense. And then maybe they don't have to win 2-1. Maybe it's 3-2, 4-3, and that's much more probable and much more doable.
Exactly. As far as the start of the season, I want to see the effort. I want to see these guys like making those plays and banging those bodies. I want to see the effort. That's what I want to see.
You'll see the effort, Steel, or they won't play.
Right.
Okay.
So that's the one thing about John Tororella. He doesn't mince any words on this. It doesn't matter who you are in the lineup, and you can check his history. He's certainly a man of his word here. If you don't, and especially defensively, if you don't play hard defensively, and that means hard on the puck. Today there's a drill.
Clear on the net. Yeah.
All about eliminating plays from along the walls and in the corners by the opponents in the defensive zone, which he seems to feel they weren't really good at. So, if they're not doing that, if defensemen aren't doing that, if forwards aren't helping the D do that, they won't play. I mean, he's clearly shown in his career, doesn't matter who you are, he will sit you if you don't
see that
pull the rope along with the rest of the guys.
Good. I want to see that on the team. I also want to see this too. When your goals against numbers go down and your goals for numbers go up, that usually tends to make sure that you have a better successful team. You know what I mean? And
it does usually help, yes.
Yeah. And so I think that's what's going to happen here with Carter Hart. I think those goals against are going to go down because of the system he's going to be playing in. Like I said, if they put together some wins at the beginning of the season, great, but I'm not looking forward to that. I'm looking to see these guys play together, play well together. I want to see the effort. I want to see these guys out there having fun, but making strides towards being the better team in the future, just like we've talked about throughout this entire show. So, like I said, cautiously optimistic. My fingers are crossed. As long as the injury bug stays away, I do agree. I think this team does have the potential to do some things this year and do some damage, and that's kind of what we're hoping for as well, too. So,
hey, Jim, I got one question. Anisimov, is he still hanging around camp? I know he got a little banged up, and I know he's a Tororella guy. We saw him in one, preseason game or maybe two, but is he a dark horse to make this team still?
He is to make the team, but he still hasn't skated since the injury. So,
right.
But whenever asked about it, John Tororella says he's still part of the mix. So,
and he was only on a PTO,
tryout,
so
yeah, he doesn't take up a roster spot since he's on a tryout. So they can, I guess, I don't know if there are any specific rules to not having him hang around, but he at least is out there, and they can sign him at any time unless he wants to go to another team. But right now, I think he's still injured. So that's where we stand with that. But from what Torch said, sounds like he's really positive on him. I wouldn't be shocked if we see him in a Flyers uniform at some point if he's able to come back from that injury, because he's had him before. He trusts him, likes his all-around game. He can help you in a lot of different areas. Great guy in the locker room. So we'll see, but I wouldn't write that name off. That's for sure.
Yeah, that was my one guy that, still a dark horse in my mind, because I do think Torch trusts him a lot. And I did like what I saw from him, even though he played in the KHL and all that. He wasn't even in the NHL last season. I really like what I saw from him, especially with Patrick Brown kind of banged up and that fourth center. I think you got to have something there, because Lazinski, let's face it, he's had 3 hip surgeries, I believe, in the last 3 seasons. So I wouldn't rely totally on him. Just questionable to make the team, or like you said, if he could somehow hang around until he gets healthy and then the team sign him, especially when Ellis may go on long-term IR or something like that, use a little bit of that cap.
Given what they're talking about with his team, if while he's recuperating, Tanner Lazinski plays really well, I think they'll go with the younger choice. But because I know a lot of people in this organization are very high on Tanner Lazinski, so he's a very smart player, and I think he could probably serve that role. So we'll see. But I also know John Tororella really likes Anisimov, so it'll be an interesting decision to see. As we know, they have a roster now. Injuries are going to happen. So, it's possible both players are with the team.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But right now, it kind of looks like either or, but that could change.
Awesome. That sounds great. Lance, thank you very much for hopping on here. Jim, thank you very much for hopping on here and
Yes, sir.
spending the time.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So, Jim, why don't you tell the folks all about your great broadcasting school, how they can get signed up for that, where they can get the website for that, because I'm here to tell you, if you guys really want to learn about how to do broadcasting or even this podcasting or interviews or anything along the sports broadcasting line, you really got to go to Jim's school. He will teach you how to do it right. He has a good breakdown. He does it for you personally. If you do the individual sessions, he sets it up for you personally and caters it to what you're trying to learn. And Jim is just world class as far as that's concerned. So if you guys get a chance, go check out his school. Jim, why don't you tell us where we can find that and where we can get that address for you?
Yeah, it's JimJacksonBroadcasting.com. Very easy to remember. Just check out the website. There's different links on the site. One of them is for the coaching. One of them is for Cameo. One of them is for voiceover work, whatever. I do a lot of stuff on the side. And I'm recently very involved with Alex Lemonade Stand for charity as well. That's also a link to a donation on there, which is for childhood pediatric cancer research and treatment. So basically, any of those links, check them out and see what you think. But the broadcast coaching, started it 2 years ago. Love it. I can't do quite as much of it once the season starts just because of the schedule, but I still get sessions in. We do individual one-on-one sessions. So if you're interested in broadcasting, whether it be play-by-play, analyst, studio work, talk show, podcasting, sideline reporting, whatever, I work with students in all those areas, and I tailor make the sessions, 3 1-hour sessions on Zoom. Looking to do maybe in person at some point, but right now Zoom sessions. And we basically, once we're completed with the sessions, I consider myself a mentor for you for as long as you want me. So if you want to have me to text or call or whatever, once you're a student of mine, you're always a student of mine. So, and again, it's JimJacksonBroadcasting.com.
Awesome. Lance, why don't you tell the folks where we can get a hold of you, where we can get all your great stuff?
Sure. You can get all my articles and every show we put out at SteelFlyers.com. You can find me on Twitter at Lance.Green39.
Awesome. You can find me on Twitter at SteelFlyers52. Appreciate you guys checking us out. And
what's that Steel for?
Okay, so let's just get into this now. Okay,
oh,
so
goodness.
We don't have
to
time to
step
get
into that.
To go. That was called a parting shot, Steel. That was, however, I will say this: your Steelers are, what's their record right now?
1-4.
Right, and the Giants are 4-1. There's a very good possibility the Steelers will have more wins than the Giants at the end of the year. Just take that.
Eagles are 5-0.
The Eagles
I
are more
doubt
wins
that.
than both
I
of those.
seriously doubt that. But anyway, but you can find
it can happen. It can happen.
it could. Hey,
Giants are doing the smoke and mirrors. Eagles are solidly good, but
solidly
I also warn you, Lance, no Super Bowl is won in September and October. You don't roll like this. You don't.
Very young team too. Very young team. They got some great pieces. I'm glad.
Young, but they're key. Yeah. What's the key to the team, Lance, in your mind? Offensive line, not so young.
Yeah, it's not so young. No, it's not.
They can't lose Kelsey. And Lane Johnson. There's certain players.
There's some big pieces
really
there.
Important. I mean, Jalen Hurts is I really like him. I never thought he deserved the criticism he got in this city for 2 years, but I think he's very good. I'm not sure he's an MVP. I think he's very good.
Right.
But you take that line away, he's suddenly not as good.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all.
So you got to keep Kelsey, especially. He's the hub of it all. Got to keep him healthy, and he's not young. And then see where it goes from there. But they're a very good team. They built this team up for this year. But it's hard to be peaking, and that Minnesota game, you couldn't play much better than they did in that game. Right. Same with the Washington game. Now they're starting to. I mean, it's really hard to keep that level. The Patriots did it the 1 year, almost went undefeated, but that team was super stellar with the best quarterback of all time.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they can. keep this up. It's really tough.
No, I definitely think they need to lose one here soon just to get that
so you don't
airheaded,
you're not one of those that feel they're going undefeated.
No, God, no,
I run into a lot of Eagles fans who think they're going undefeated.
No, I'm realistic. They need to lose one to get that head back to normal level to fit in their helmets. But I really like what they did. Like you said, this offseason they went out and they got him pieces so that he needed. And, that's what they didn't have the 2 prior years. And everybody was so hard on him. Now you see what he can do with an offensive line in front of him and the pieces he needed, to be able to throw to. So I'm optimistic.
He's had the line.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
They've had a great line. They went out and got a second receiver, and they already had a tight end. They already had Devontae. Right. I mean, they already, let's not, they had some weapons last year. I mean, it wasn't like he didn't have weapons last year.
Yeah, but they were kind of banged up.
A great tight end. They could always run the ball with that line. You could always run the ball. No matter who the running back is, you could always run. That's a great line. And, their defense last year, the defense has improved. And, we'll see. I really liked it. They're the best team in the NFL so far. There's no question about that. The record shows that. But just how they've won up to the last, they were good against Jacksonville, not great against Arizona. Really lucky to win that game. I mean, Kyler Murray, I don't know what he was doing. But Dallas,
I think they need to run the ball more.
Real telltale sign. But their schedule is pretty light after Dallas, isn't it, for a while? I think it is. So they could go on a long. If they start getting 9-0, 10-0, Lance. Oh boy, these fans.
I'm here to tell you, I think that Miami Dolphins players are going to be popping corks here at some point in time this year because there's not going to be an undefeated Eagles team. I just don't think.
No, absolutely.
It would be great, and it would be a great story for them, but I just think that Zonka and the rest of the guys are going to be drinking champagne again this year because the undefeated team is going to go.
It's tough, and it's gotten tougher since those guys played. Those guys, 17-0 is what they went, including the Super Bowl. Now you got to go 17-0 just to be perfect through the regular season. So
no team has ever made the Super Bowl at 1-4. So just to let you know, they may get more wins than the Giants, but they ain't making the Super Bowl.
Giants not making the Super Bowl either. But I will say this about the Giants, as I think I said earlier, it is a case in point of how much a coach can change the atmosphere and design and everything, because the Giants, not only they're less talented than they were last year. Yeah. They got rid of Bradbury. They got rid of a whole bunch of players for salary cap reasons. They gutted the team. They had 2 high draft picks, but they gutted the team, really didn't bring in many veterans at all. And they're 4-1 and playing way better than they ever did last year, really over the last 4 or 5 years. It goes to show you when you get a coaching staff in, I mean, they've had great coordinators, how much it can change everything. And that's what I say about the Flyers. John Tororella, and by the way, Bradshaw is an outstanding assistant coach, a proven assistant coach from the defensive side and the penalty kill side. Rocky Thompson, not as proven, but people speak very highly of him. They've got a really good staff. You just never know how much impact that could have in getting this team turned back around. So there's another reason for hope for Flyers fans when you look at the Giants and other teams that have had managerial changes in baseball like the Phillies or the coaching changes in the other sports, and it kind of turns around. So there's another reason for hope. I know Flyers fans are looking for reasons for hope. There's another one.
I mean, all you have to do is look at the Vancouver Canucks from last year. And they hired Boudreau, and Boudreau came in and changed the culture, and suddenly they were a different team.
And Marty St. Louis in Montreal also. I mean,
same thing. Perfect
example. They didn't have quite as much of a win-loss turnaround, but the whole feeling of that team changed when he came in. And look at what Cole Caulfield did once that. So we see there are examples of that. Now, I'm not promising John Tororella will do that, but he's done it before. He's changed his teams. He's had players that he's taken over who've gotten better under him. So have hope, Flyer fans. And unlike Steel, don't completely give up in the playoffs.
Oh, man. Well, I'll tell you what.
Seriously, Steel, you are in the majority.
I know. I know.
You're in the majority.
I know. And I'm trying to be won over. I'm trying to be won over.
We could do this. I don't know how long, probably another couple months before we do this again. And it, like I said, it could be a completely different scenario. If they're really struggling, we could be looking at, making a lot of moves to just build up capital and go for the youth. in 2 months, maybe the team's showing some signs of life and we're hopeful. But at least for me, before a puck has even been dropped, I got to still hope that at least there's a chance to make the playoffs.
All right. Before the puck is dropped, I hope the team makes the playoffs.
And then once the puck's dropped,
5 minutes in. Already pulling up off track.
Oh man! With that,
let's have Steel do the ceremonial puck drop for the opener.
Yes. Oh, I would kill to do that. Are you kidding? Oh man! With that being said, folks, thank you very much for checking out the Hockey Writers Inc. We were joined by Jim Jackson from NBC Sports Philadelphia, the voice of the Philadelphia Flyers. Jim Jackson, thank you very much for hopping on and having some fun with us. Lance Green, thank you very much for all the great stuff that you do for Hockey Writers Inc. I'm SteelFlyers, your co-host, and we'll see you guys next time on the next edition of the Hockey Writers Inc. Thanks, everyone.